The Titanic disaster wasn't caused by a lack of warnings. In fact, the Titanic received multiple iceberg warnings before the collision. Messages from other ships warned of dangerous ice directly in Titanic's path. Yet the ship continued at nearly full speed. So why were the warnings ignored? Was it arrogance, pressure to arrive early, or a deadly chain of mistakes? Because the most shocking part of the Titanic disaster is this: it may have been completely preventable. On April 10, 1912, the RMS Titanic began its maiden voyage from Southampton, England. It was the largest passenger ship ever built, a floating palace, a symbol of human achievement, and according to many newspapers, virtually unsinkable. Thousands of passengers boarded with confidence. No one knew that within days, the world's most luxurious ship would become one of history's greatest tragedies. And long before the iceberg appeared, the warning signs had already begun. April was iceberg season in the North Atlantic. Huge chunks of ice regularly broke away from Greenland and drifted into shipping lanes. Captains crossing the Atlantic constantly exchanged ice reports to help each other avoid danger. On April 14th, the day of the disaster, multiple ships reported large ice fields directly ahead of Titanic's route. These weren't vague warnings. They were specific messages describing dangerous conditions: icebergs, sea ice, and entire fields of floating ice. The danger was real, and Titanic's crew knew it. Early on April 14th, messages began arriving from nearby ships. One warning reported large quantities of ice directly ahead. Another described heavy pack ice and multiple icebergs. Each report was received by Titanic's wireless operators, but there was a problem. The wireless room was overwhelmed. Operators were busy sending passenger messages to shore. The ship's communication system was crowded with personal telegrams. As a result, some warnings never reached the bridge with the urgency they deserved. Time was slipping away. Then came one of the most important warnings of all. A nearby ship called the Californian had stopped completely. The captain believed the ice was too dangerous to continue sailing. The Californian sent a message warning Titanic that they were surrounded by ice, but Titanic's wireless operator was busy transmitting passenger traffic. Frustrated, he reportedly replied, "Keep out, shut up, I'm working Cape Race." The message was never treated as an emergency. Soon afterward, the Californian's radio operator went to bed. Its wireless set was turned off. Within hours, Titanic would desperately need help. But nobody would hear the call. Perhaps the biggest mystery is this: why didn't Titanic reduce speed? Despite repeated warnings, the ship continued traveling at around 22 knots, nearly maximum speed. Some historians believe Captain Edward Smith felt confident the crew would spot any iceberg in time. Others argue that slowing down was not common practice unless conditions became extreme. And some believe pressure existed to maintain schedule and demonstrate the ship's capabilities. Whatever the reason, Titanic continued racing, straight toward disaster. The conditions that night were unusually dangerous. The ocean was calm, almost too calm. Normally, waves break against the base of icebergs, making them easier to spot. But on this night, the sea was like glass. There was no moon. Visibility was poor, and the lookouts had one more problem. They didn't have binoculars. The binoculars had accidentally been left behind before departure. The crew was relying entirely on their eyes. Then at 11:40 p.m., a dark shape suddenly appeared ahead, an iceberg, directly in Titanic's path. The lookouts rang the warning bell. 3 sharp strikes, danger ahead. The bridge immediately ordered evasive maneuvers, but it was too late. The iceberg scraped along Titanic's starboard side. Passengers barely felt the impact. Some thought nothing had happened, but below the waterline, the damage was catastrophic. The iceberg had opened multiple sections of the hull. Within minutes, seawater began flooding the ship. The Titanic was doomed. Over the next 2 hours and 40 minutes, the world's greatest ship slowly died. More than 1,500 people lost their lives, and many historians continue asking the same question. What if Titanic had slowed down? What if the warnings had been taken more seriously? What if the Californian's message had been treated as urgent? What if just one decision had changed? We'll never know. But what we do know is that Titanic wasn't destroyed by a surprise iceberg. The danger had been reported again and again, The warnings were there, and they were ignored. Today, more than a century later, the Titanic remains one of history's most haunting disasters. Not because nobody saw the danger, but because they did. The warnings arrived, the messages were received, the ice was reported. Yet the ship sailed on. And on the cold night of April 14, 1912, those ignored warnings became one of the deadliest maritime tragedies.